well, some of the players, not most by any means, unable to reproduce because they're in prison. We didn't have a lot of dynastic events. The plant heads had a son, finally, which is very useful. And the Lustenbergs here, who have two boys, so at least they have, a dynasty coming forward, perhaps. But the mother died, and that's somewhat disturbing because that means I've got no chance of creating a large dynasty early on. Now, of course, the French and the Spanish are locked away, so they're not going to have one. So, yeah, we're down to Italy and England as the only two countries kind of playing the dynastic game anymore. One thing that I note from the last turn and the carving up of France is that one of the factors here is the lack of any kind of excuse for war, a casus belli, whatever, casus bellum, because in general there would be one. Sometimes it was fabricated, there's no question about that, and that's why you kind of don't like to say, well, you must have one to go to war. I like the games like Pax Britannica. Well, Pax Britannica just doesn't allow them without it. But Europa Universalis, which if you don't have one, you pay a penalty to go to war. There's nothing, maybe you could have to pay some cash or something to manufacture something. Maybe that would be a reasonable answer. Because the idea of just going to war without a reason is part of what caused this, right? Everybody took the opportunity, born out of the damn chit draw of all things, to just, pile on to the guy who's hurt. And there's nothing that would really stop that. You wouldn't have that otherwise, right? If somebody had to pay for one, well, there would have to be some kind of dynastic agreement to take an offensive action to generate the alliance to go in together, or you would have to equally pay something. Maybe there could be some kind of lesser alliances beyond the royal marriages, which, again, there's so much complexity in all that this is trying to cover, but it just doesn't address any of it. But the truth of the matter was, you didn't have a lot of situations where rulers would just go grab somebody else's territory without some pretense, at least. And if they did, there would be the church sanctioning them and shit like that. So, you had to at least kind of manufacture the pretext, usually. Your people, they don't want to go to war without a reason. Your nobles, etc. Even when you look at nations from an earlier period, from the ancient period, they still generally had some reason that they could excuse it, some event that happened, whatever. And again, I'm not saying that, the level could be abstract enough that you pay $5 and you get it. But you pay that $5 before armies are raised, so that, you're paying that penalty right away out of your cash, and you're going to have a smaller army, Anyway, I just feel like that's where this game went south right away. And for this, well, I gave the announcement as to what the dynastic impacts were. I think that's all there is there. So now we go to the taxes. And everybody has to make their tax decisions secretly. I'm not sure. Oh, we have the dynastic discussions, which we do want to do, just like last turn. We want to do them, you know, during the dynastic round when negotiations can be made. So yeah, let me think about those. I think I'm going to be stuck with the same kind of cumbersome thing that I had at the beginning of the game, rolling a die to see who can make an offer, who can't, whatever. I think I'm just going to go with that mechanism. Not quite sure when it. So in something like Pax Britannica, I have a proper wind down to that. I don't have one here. Theoretically, I could just keep rolling. Eventually, I was able to come to a conclusion there are no further deals to be made. But I think it's a good way to start is to see who gets to make the first negotiated deal. I feel like they're going to be very limited one-turn type situations. Yes, there was this attempt here, but I think it kind of fell apart. As soon as France collapsed, as soon as the French army disappeared, it was like, well, all bets are off now, right? So the first deal, the English got the die roll for it, and they proposed, with a failure, essentially a trade where they'd give a grain, I believe, to the Spanish. The Spanish produce grain. They produce one of everything, actually, now. But they're a grain short, and so I could give a grain away for a wool. And I don't produce wool as the English, so that seemed like a deal. Along with, we will be at peace, So I could transit, materials through each other on my own turn. To get things. I kind of understand the advanced or optional rule for transitioning of materials. I don't think that trade should be necessarily that fast. I don't know that it shouldn't, but it just seems like you could almost always pass a route. The sea zones, well, it's possible somebody can block them off with some ships, but for the most part, the sea means that trade will just happen automatically, and I would rather that not happen. I would rather it be a little harder to do. Anyway, the Spanish-English did not come to a deal, so now I roll, and another country gets to come up with a deal, and eventually I'll come to the point where there are no deals left to be made, in my estimation. Or maybe I roll a die to see, well, do we keep hunting? If everybody's just kind of saying no to each other. A whole lot of potential alliances here, and they keep failing on the odd even roll. So we've got things like Italy and Spain working on a trade situation, Spain trading to try to get their king back, England and Spain trying to make a trade, or England and Spain trying to make a trade. They have, again, coordinated and aligned stuff, and it's almost like nobody is willing to deal with one another. I think the only viable path left is France, of all things. And giving France's king back doesn't really sound like a great deal unless it's for resources. So let me see about that. So we want grain, so a grain and a semi-luxury for the French king. I think this is the last one, and everyone else has just kind of failed. And I haven't done every possible permutation, but some don't make sense, like Italy and England can't really cut a deal except let's carve up Spain together, which, given the shaky situation that we're in, England's like, well, if you're attacking Spain, then I'm free against Germany, who I have an advantage against, which seems like sort of the de facto right now. They're not near each other, so they're not threatening each other. So let's see if the Germans can get something for the French king, along with kind of a peace, just if the French king comes out, He's not going to attack. No. So I'm going to say there were no dynastic agreement, no agreements whatsoever, informal agreements during the dynastic round, which puts us to it's time to tax and resources. Fair amount of increased taxes being made here. Germany, because they're afraid the English have a bigger army, as good a leader. England, I gave like a 50-50 chance. They chose not to. But both France and Spain, France with nothing basically, they're collecting $7. You know, they've got one province left. And Spain, no king. They're worried about the Italians coming in. The English were willing to take a chance. Italy, of course, was almost they had a 1 in 6 chance of going ahead with the higher taxes, because clearly we're in a war state now. That wasn't obvious that we were going to be thrown into that big a war right off the bat with the game. And then resources went down and the famine came off, and so all the resources are down in place. Nobody's got any agreements, so none of these resources are going to go anywhere terribly useful. There are a couple of people though who are able to make something. Spain is notably capable of it. I think they're the only ones. I think everybody else is not going to be able to exchange resources for money. That's a big deal. That means that Spain, with their current situation, if they get to go early enough and get their resources home, they're probably going to be able to cash them in, get a big pile of money, and that may allow them to make, get their king back, or, cut some deals, or build a big army to hope that they can beat Italy with a king. The Italian king is good, so that may not work too well, but it may be our only option. Yeah, and let's see, where are we beyond that? I paid the maintenance. We have not raised forces yet. So now we come to that kind of weird bidding to build armies. To consider, there is an absolute maximum to the army size you can have. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, there are 20 armies in the game total, so this is not that big a deal. But there are 10 army spaces total, and I am able... it's only home country. So there are some countries, notably France, that can't build much. They can only build a maximum of 2 armies. Now, they don't have enough money to build 2 armies. And again, they're pretty much knocked out of the game unless somebody's giving them stuff, or the event deck or something is giving them something. They're down to this one territory. That territory looks kind of yummy too. It's got a huge stack of armies in it though, because it still has a working capital. But remember, once the capital is gone, then it never reappears. The capital marker doesn't have the same strength value that the printed capital does. So there's that, but as long as the situation is a violent one among these other countries, nobody's liable to just go in and finish France off, basically. Their whole home country left puts down $60 saying, hey, we'll build our army, our whole army. Deal with it. That's a problem. Italy's looking, and they only have $39. Why do they have so little? Well, they taxed at 5. They still have a big army left, so they're paying $2 per, and they're kind of looking at it and like, I don't know. Now, big armies aren't that great. Remember how the combat chart works. You only roll 1 die, and you can only do a maximum of 4 hits without a leader. So there's kind of maybe a smaller Italian army could work. But on the other hand, Spain still has money left. What do I want to do about that? Am I worried? Because Spain could put a fleet down if I spend all the Italian money. And that's kind of part of the engine here. Equilibrium has been reached. Everybody's kind of bought their armies. Now the question is, does somebody want to punt some more money into fleets? Um, Spain definitely does. They want to open up the possibility of raids into the Italian territory, and that means the Italians have to counteract that. And that means the Spanish can counteract that. So Italy can build 2 fleets for $10, but Spain can up that to their 3 fleets, and now they've pretty much built almost everything. I have like 1 fleet left to build. Another similar question with Germany and England. England kind of needs another fleet to block the Germans from being able to pass through and attack England. And that's assuming I get a first move on them, right? Germany could just invade, you know. Not much I can do about that. I've only got 1 ship left I can build, so I'll build a ship and an army. I don't feel like the circle around the table makes a lot of sense, because it always means that like in 18XX, like in 1830, and in many 18XX games, certain players just have an advantage by their seating position in terms of order. Now the Chit Cup tries to do away with that, but I think I'm going to do away with that 1 step further by randomizing the order of placement of armies each turn. Again, a little tweak, but I think it just makes a lot of sense for the game, because otherwise, Italy rolled first. That means Germany almost always will go after Italy. So they have just this dynamic where they always have the edge on Italy. And there's, this edge that goes around the table, basically. Which means that if you're Germany, you probably want to go to war with Italy, which may make sense, Historically, let's take a look. If you're Germany, you want to go to war with Italy. If you're England, you want to go to war with Germany? Nah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. France, go to war with England? Not really. France mainly was the attacked, Spain, you want to go to war with France? Maybe, maybe you can make arguments that way. But I think randomizing it, especially given the abstract and ahistorical nature of the game, the only thing that matters here is actually the naval placement, because all the land units go in the capital. So there's a lot less room for things to get ugly. I'm going to do this with that, but it doesn't really make a difference. So, for example, here, Sicily's fine. For Spain, I'm most worried about Italy, so Granada's fine. And for England, it's absolutely vital that I have this ship here. Actually, I probably didn't even need to build it. I could have built another army because I have the spare ship there, and Germany had already committed to entirely an army setup. Oh well, we'll leave that mistake in place, because why not? I mean, the existence of the German Navy is essentially a mistake. I probably should have scrapped it, except it's turned out I'm at war with England, of all people, which seems a little odd, but we'll live with it. And that puts me into the movement sequences, and it's time for breakies. So much may depend on who gets the jump out of the Chit Cup again. I mean, this is kind of ridiculous. Yes, you could withdraw. You could retreat from combat and take a bunch of hits. 1 round of combat has been sufficient to wipe out most armies. It may not matter it may not be enough to wipe out an army this size, but it's enough to perhaps do a lot of damage, especially since, well, I think no matter what, if the leader is leaving, you're not allowed to roll the comparative strength check at the beginning of the battle. That's what I seem to remember it being phrased as, but I may have gotten it wrong. So at the start of a round, either side can retreat, giving free attacks. Okay. See, this is the weird thing, but fleeing from battle is different from retreat. So fleeing from battle means you can keep your king from being killed, period, or your leader from being killed or captured or whatever. That is different from retreating, where you may take a large number of losses, including you might get captured. So the Chit Cup's going to matter because let's say the English go first. Well, first of all, I could reinforce the hell out of this, and then the Germans aren't going to make any headway against me easily. Or I could smack into this and actually move 1, 2, 3, and bring forces together into here and actually push the Germans much, much further, and then put them in a harsh position where this big army may not matter because they may have lost their king. Again, there's going to be a big English army there, so it's not like it's a complete situation of huge army versus smaller leader army. We're not looking. So Spain and Italy, that's what that looks like it's going to be. But Italy has a chance to bring reinforcements up and make it almost impossible for Spain to beat them. But Spain doesn't need to beat them. Spain needs to survive because they have the resources to pull their stuff together. And just all kind of weird shit happens because of this chit pull, where maybe on the last segment of the turn, there's an opportunity to grab shit and stuff like that. So this becomes a really, really weird and violent and chaotic game, I believe. He gets the draw, and it's huge. They split their army, sending most of it, some 10 units or so, into Flanders, make sure they wipe out the English king. They're going to either get a capture or kill off that. And the sea lanes are open, so they sail up to grab a resource up there. This may convince others to do things. Oh, I gotta get this guy out of there. He's in a dangerous position. 1, 2. We'll throw him over here. I chose not to divide the German army because I couldn't protect it. So like I could have sent, if I could have protected, like if this was off on, if the English couldn't march into 1, 2, I could have maybe blocked off East Anglia or something, but there's no such option here. So now it looks like Germany not only killed the French, but they're going to take down the English for the most part. I mean, the English have an army here and can fight, but that could be a crapshoot, really. The answer for the English is that discretion is the better half of valor. Even though I have a decent king, I could get real lucky, right? Actually, I can't. I'm not that decent, right? The German king is also strength +2, so they'd cancel each other out. So I am just going to flee. I don't think anyone else can reach me. And that means these guys can do a retreat and maybe some armies will survive. Probably not, but maybe. Got my event card. Prince demands title. The oldest male royal character who is not a king and who holds no other title demands a province to govern. There is no one this applies to. Everyone's too young to be given a title. So that's cool. Okay, so the Germans succeeded here. They wiped out the entire English army. And now they're here. This is not actually on the boat. It wasn't allowed to move because it was just captured. So we'll see what happens with that. But who's the next draw? This could be another important thing. There's other balancing factors. The Spain-Italy thing. Who goes first there? Italy is going to be going first. That's a big deal, I think. Well, maybe not, because there's a bigger Spanish navy, which could cause problems. 1, 2, 3. I could land anywhere on the Italian coast. That's problematic. And the Italians cannot possibly get at the main Spanish army. So Italy may actually split up its forces or something. Neither. I wouldn't have been able to get naval dominance, I think. I mean, the Spanish had more cash because of their taxation strategy. Um, I don't know how good this is because the Italian army could actually be attacked by the Spaniards, but defending things lightly doesn't make a lot of sense. But defending things lightly and pushing into Spanish territory does, because if I own this still, now I'm threatening the interior of Spain and maybe their big army. But yeah, I don't know what Spain's going to do. You know, they have so many different options. One of which is they could go attack Tuscany and try to wear that down. They have a big enough force they could actually maybe capture it. And there's a lot of yummies there, no? It's got nothing. And they have no pieces to move. Spain, maybe there's cards that allow you to escape. But Spain is in an interesting position. If I take things from Italy, if I get my cash, we might be able to work something out. Other chances? I could take my shot at this. This has a strength of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I could bring everything over there and try to get my king back and try to get all those resources, and Italy will not be in good shape if that happens. Or I could take my chances on this. I can sail into there. The Italian fleet can't stop me no matter what I do, and launch an attack and try to capture his king. That would be a pretty fair exchange too. The big thing that my problem is that, you know, I'd kind of like to take this. I don't really need Aragon back all that badly, but having this is important because my resources, although I can sail them, no, I can't sail them. I need my fleet to sail them. Wow, maybe the Italian fleet should have been out here. Fleets aren't fast enough. They only move 3, so I could go 1, 2, 3. I wouldn't be able to pick up my resources and bring them back. And with the advanced resource transmission, I could just ship them back into Castile. And I was kind of counting on that, but not really. I've decided to clear this out, and I've sent a few forces here. Let me send one more. Just to increase my odds of succeeding with that, because that's too important. I forgot about something. I can't take Tuscany easily. There's an Italian army there. So that actually was like a 14. I would have been able to send 12. No king. I would love to do it, but if I can capture the Italian king, that's great. I don't know if he's going to stand and fight or not. Let me think. Bonus die rolls, I'm going to stand and fight, but the Spaniards get to choose which fight they want to do first. So, geez. I mean, I'm going to try to retreat here. The Spaniards are going to pick that one first. That means 1 through 4, the Spaniards kill that Italian unit. They do not. Now, oh, I believe I'm well, I can retreat into here. Oh, there were 2 units, so it would have to be a 2, 3, or 4. Okay, but it didn't happen, and this is going to exchange hands again. Back into Spanish control. And I can just keep my pile of resources separate from my army. Now, but this is trickier because our King Peter actually has a +3, but it's a +2 strength essentially. So he gets 2 free rolls. Now, they can't do the 5 or 6 hits because game is weird. If I'm remembering things right. Again, there's these. Wow, what's up with that? I think the pre-battle roll. No, it doesn't count as an army. Force can inflict increases. Okay. In the battle province, if the king is present, he causes this. If royal pieces is present at a battle, yeah. So wait a minute. What? Hold on. I'm trying to see if he gets the bonus. Can he hit on 5s and 6s with that bonus die roll? No, it's only 1 through 4. 5 or 6 do not do the casualties on this bonus rolls. So there's a chance I don't do anything, but there's a chance I could like wipe out the Spanish army just with my bonus rolls, and certainly make things a lot closer. I do 5 hits. Highly, highly random, eh? Okay, so that's where the Spaniards are. And now I could withdraw, but I'm not going to. I made my choice. So I've got 4 or more. And here he's got 6. I don't know who to use for what. We'll use white for the... Oh no, purple is the Spaniard. Yeah, so we'll use the red for the Italians, I guess. Even though the Spanish look orange instead of purple, I don't know what the hell's up with that. Okay, so the Spanish rolled a 6. That does nothing. The Italians get a 1. That kills 1 more Spaniard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we'll keep fighting. The thing is, we have money. Okay, so 5 hits on the Spaniards wipes them out, I believe. Yeah, so there goes the Spanish army. But we did 3 hits on the Italians. But Italy wins the day there, which is a big deal. And that means the Spanish fleet has to leave. I have nowhere safe to go except out at sea. Yay! Okay. The English, uh-oh. Did I bring... God, the control markers say control on them and similar enough. I mean, they just fucking look the same as the armies to me. So yeah, I didn't have to do the sale I did. So 1, 2... I got nowhere better to land. All right, so what the English have done is they've bottled back into England. They've trapped the Germans there. And now I got my king there. And here's the thing. Hold on. 1, 2. Geez, if I land here... Yeah, I got no German fleets. So I can't make the crossing because you need Calais and Kent to do the free crossing. And the German fleet is already trapped there and can't get through. So that's going to work. Now, there's a problem. The Germans can extricate themselves. They can load up on the ships, move to here, they stop, but there's no naval battle or anything. So they're just kind of like stuck at sea, but not forever. They can then move next turn and pull the resources out of England. So England has lost heavily, but they haven't. They're losing heavily on the continent, but they haven't lost the war from this. And that should be the end of the first round, and we'll do some chit scrambling for the next one. Weirdness that's not too bad. Baron demand France got the draw, and they're not going to be moving. Baron demands to marry into royal family. A powerful noble demands the hand of the oldest unmarried royal female from any dynasty. We should have a few that are max age, which is to say they were 1295. And within that, he chooses the one with the highest constitution or guile if still tied. The player may refuse and has to make a rebellion roll. Well, that sounds terrible. On a random province or accept. It doesn't say how you randomize the province. It should be one of theirs, but I don't know what that means. The Baron is 30 years old, +1 strength, +2 charisma, and may be used by the player as if he were a royal piece. No children of the marriage should be recorded. So you basically get to trade a daughter, which may be valuable, there's no question of that, for a military prince who isn't going to fuck with your dynasty at all. That sounds pretty sweet, actually. Let me see who that's going to be. So we got one here. We got two. So it's higher Khan. Eleanor's higher. So far it's a plant head. Yeah. So the English are going to get a bonus prince, and in exchange, Eleanor is given away. She could actually become queen. Weird. But no children can result, period. So he's been created and married into Eleanor. Now, she could still end up either as queen or surviving his death or whatever. She's too young. He can't marry her. Fuck that, man. Yeah, there's no one... No, this has no effect, actually. Yeah, what I was actually thinking was, well, if he came up, I could... so I should not have done this. I had to roll up his con because his con wasn't specified on the card. Now, maybe it means it's always 0. Maybe it means you roll it, whatever. But also, on top of that, yeah, she's 10 years old. No, she has to be 15 to be married. Yeah. I'm trying to think. Oh, he could have been made a duke or something and given a province, which would be huge, because he's not part of another dynasty. So the royal gets to control him and use him as a governor and all those bonuses, and that would be really advantageous in many ways. Increased taxes, I guess going into the dynasty's hands, I don't know, but he creates an extra couple bucks, and other effects as well. That would have been a big bonus for England, but no, she's too young. That would be wrong. All right. It's the jump again, getting the next action, pushes into here, which puts Italy in an interesting position. You know, again, do I want to retreat? My fleet's kind of screwed, but I can slip away. But the real problem is, if I run away, I'm giving Spain the thing they want, which is the time. They need time to make their way into being able to throw down another pile of cash, etc. So I think the best thing I can do is take my chance at the fight instead of running. I again get 2 dice at bonus, which is huge. And I do 4 hits, which badly damages the Spanish army. And now there's 1 Spaniard to 3 points of Italians. The Italians wipe out the Spanish, and Spain's looking like they're in a lot more trouble now. I don't have a big enough army right now to take Castile, but I have a big enough army to take territory away from Spain. And Spain basically has no army left and no king. Much determined by the Chit Cup. England got the next move. That means the Germans can't slip the resources and everything out on the fleet and just run away. And we've got an improved chance of winning the fight there and clearing the Germans off of the island. Sweeps in, taking Angoulême, Nevers, Andalusia, spread all over the place. Hey, no army to face me. I can grab what I can reach, which is, 1 territory in each direction at a time. They're going to take a risk here. Grab Calais, but instead of punching my way slowly through the continent, I'm just grabbing what I can. I'm kind of keeping my deal like I had a prospective deal with Italy in turn one. Well, we haven't violated that at all. What the hell? Let's just not poke each other, take care of. We both have the advantage. Let's just take care of it. But I am going to go for Champagne because the resources there mean an extra pile of money. And I don't remember how much cash it is, but it's a goodly amount. A +2 leader. There are 10. I'm going to use neutral counters because it'll help me keep track of what's going on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't think it specifies to do this. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. So I've got 10 French armies, and I think I've got 10 plus the leader German armies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plus the leader. And I'm allowed to just attack that big thing multiple times. Remember, if I don't kill it, it all grows back. But I can't stay there without attacking it as far as I can tell. Germany's in trouble. I felt like I had the odds. Apparently, they weren't that good. And I feel like I have to keep going. Oh, God, I can't keep going at 2. Yeah. So I'm going to flee. But the problem with this is the English are going to be able to wipe me out. No matter kind of where I go. That's not a good place to go. I'll flee there. And that leaves 1 German army. I'll leave it retreating. And I still can get shot by the castle, I guess. And I am. So yeah, the Germans did not succeed against the French. And they're in trouble now. And I forgot to pull their chip. Not that that matters. Okay, that puts us to the 3rd round. It doesn't mean anything, but it's got a storms 1 through 4. Now, if I understand correctly, let's take a look at the event card rules. That means I'm going to have between 1 and 4 storms. Let me... Storms. They follow by range. If it has such a reference drawn, roll 1 die. If it falls within the range, the storm's event will occur in addition to the event on the card. Okay, so random storms. It's important this time because there are fleets at sea. There is no storms. I thought it would be 1 to 4 areas that are hit by storms. It's not the case. And the Germans get to go first with their almost nothing. They'll try to defend themselves. At a point where this happens with some other games too that I have. EU is one, and that particularly it happens in Empires in Arms, where there aren't enough control markers to express what's going on. The Italians have swept through much of Spain here and through southern France, and it's all good, Well, for them, not so good for Spain. It's looking pretty bad for Spain, but they do have a semi-luxury trade-in for whatever that's worth, and I think they're the only ones getting any kind of trade in here. Actually, we're pretty much unable to capitalize on anything. Well, I could have grabbed Friesland. That might... Hold on, I'll do that. There was only 1 army here. The reason was there's fleets here. They can land here 1, 2, and then I can land at Friesland and capture something at least. And that's something important too. Basically has nothing they can do except maybe patrol the waterways. I think that's the best thing they can do, is just leave their fleet out there. It could get killed by a storm. That gets us to 1310. I'll put some dice over here to remind me that the full turn is over. And whew, I mean violence, right? And we basically have 1.5 countries wiped out. France was knocked out, period. Spain is in really bad shape, although they will be coming back, and they're going to be struggling with Italy, and Germany and England are going to be struggling. Germany doesn't have any big bonus coming to them, but they're also not as on the ropes as the Spaniards are. They have their king, they have most of their territory, and they have more than their territory. They lost one thing. They lost a medal, which doesn't really help England. So, yeah. Italy feels like they're winning the war here. They may not be. England and Germany, it's just hard to tell. England may be in a really horrible place right here. But I wanted to take that metal resource. It shouldn't be too bad. I can get on my boats and leave. Remember how this game is all about dynasties and everything? Not that we've had a marriage or anything. Now we can actually begin playing that part of the game. But again, you know, it's so skewed at this point, right? It's not in that balanced case where it starts, and I'm really not that convinced that playing the basic game or playing without those neutrals would have changed this much. It feels like a very chaotic game where you take the advantages that you get and you just storm in and do terrible things to your opponent. Because your opponent can't defend his land. There's no defense in this game. Good stuff can be taken on round 3 of any turn by whoever goes late. There's going to be something yummy for them to go grab. And yeah. The trade item movement, first of all, they don't really specify whether or not they have a movement rate. I was thinking that might be the one thing that could save this game, is if you could trade items not during the movement phase. During that dynasty phase, obviously, if you write, you know, your royal marriages, which can be complicated as all hell, every second turn, you know, every even number turn, I get a grain from you, and just all kind of complex trying to create a network so that you get your maximum trade stuff through your marriages contracted. But if there was a way to just exchange trade goods very easily, that might have prevented some of this, because there's just too many things lying out there that are good to grab, right? You know, if you're moving first, you can run up and grab something that's on your border or whatever. Yeah. Even if there's no army there, you can still go grab something when it's time for the yummies to fall before someone else does. So I don't think anything would prevent this kind of chaotic warfare. Yeah. And the movement of trade goods is still pulsed by player turns, so there's not an easy way. I mean, people during the dynasty phase can agree, I will send a grain your way if you send a wool my way on your turn. But there's no enforcement to that, right? So if I send the grain on my turn, I may get nothing in exchange, and that may piss me off. But that may also mean that I send you that grain, and we had sort of a peace agreement, and you hit me all over the place, and all kind of bad stuff is happening, right? So you can't really, they don't really move around. So conquest becomes the driving force for them. And then also, I mean, we'll see. We'll take a look and see if this violent situation can be solved by the dynastic situation. I don't think it can. I don't think France has anything worthwhile to offer. All they have is their capital. They don't have a king, but maybe they have an important, they got sons. They've got an important place that wants a daughter. But daughters are just commodities in this game. They're good things It's not like you want to get rid of your daughters particularly. They're useless to you except as a commodity, but they're not, they're not hurting you to have them. In fact, you might draw a random baron who joins your faction for that. Sons are sort of a liability. I mean, they're not. They're good to have. But they create this desire for daughters, right? Or for someone else's daughters. And that becomes, a mechanism. But France, with their sons, has absolutely nothing they could do. Unless, here's what they could do. They could give a son to someone as a prince, saying that they transfer it to the dynasty. You don't have to do that with a potential royal, with someone who might inherit the crown. You can actually give away your rights completely to the other dynasty. And, that second French son might be useful, although he's kind of the backup for the low constitution first son. But again, that might be something that Germany wants, and wants more than they want this French king who's not doing them any good. And in that alliance, they could write down that France and Germany cannot go to war for the duration of that marriage. And I don't know, maybe there's other things as well that could be traded that are of value. I don't know what Germany needs. Germany needs food. Well, we have food and that. Yeah, France can get their king back. There's almost no question of that. It's just a question of how much they're willing to pay for it. And if England captures Saxony, they get the king with that and maybe trade him to the French, for something, for a different situation. So, it's possible that French territory might start growing back, but it looks pretty fucking unlikely unless the events do it. Everything else, well, maybe none of the rest of it's going to resolve itself fully, which means the dynastic system will get to be in play for everyone else, and France will simply be the fifth wheel in this game, trying to regain their position, which can happen if you lose your entire territory too. Your dynasty continues on. Uh-oh. Okay, the first upload of a turn is having trouble right now. Got stuck at like 80%, I think because I played a video game. It somehow fucks up with the flash on the upload, so when I got to it this morning, it was like 80% up when I woke up and wasn't moving at all, so I'm re-uploading. So this is an interesting turn because all the initial guaranteed children become adults or semi-adults. 15 years old, they can marry. You can see we got some counters for male children on the board. Nothing too exciting happened in the Dynastic series. We had a new child. Let's see. Anna of Italy was born. It's okay that Peter's away on campaign. He's still it's still assumed he comes home, at least once in the 5 years to put Peter's Peter in. Yeah, so this is the first dynastic phase where there's the real dynastic issues coming into play. And we have some potential marriages. One of the most notable is up here, Charles of Luxembourg. He's looking for another wife. He's the king. That could be useful. On the other hand, he's looking for two women right now. One for himself, one for his son. And his son might be the more important choice. But, a second marriage might also be important. And unfortunately, by doing this the way I'm doing it, yeah, You know, in a regular genealogical chart where you're working your way from the future, you would, you know, put his first wife on one side and his second wife on the other, and things are not going to be that easy. I may just link the second wife down off that first wife just for my own ease. And again, there's not a lot of room on the regular sheets of paper. Huge scrolls make more sense. For negotiations, I'm using the same framework. You get used to starting to do something, that's what you do. Uh-oh. We're in an even number year. I sort these out. So the Germans get those. France gets these. And Spain, that is, gets these. Okay. My first roll was for Italy, and the first thing I look at is, oh, hey, I've got a son who needs to be married. I'm at war with Spain. Maybe we can resolve this, possibly with a transfer of territory. Transfer of territory is kind of a weird thing. I can't just hand territory over. It has to be occupied, I believe. There are dowries and such not, so we'll look at that. I don't think there's a formal mechanism for just handing control over to someone, though. Which means you have to make a complex sort of, if that's the case, if you're writing the marriage alliance, you have to make it kind of complicated in that kind of situation. This is potentially valuable. There is a female available in Spain. Trading, because Spain's gonna fuck. I forgot to do something. Where do you cash in? You cash in resources at the end of the turn. Spain would have been cashing in resources. Let me wind back to that. But Spain is going to have enough money to field an army still. And next turn, they're going to have a son. He's an okay military guy. It wouldn't be bad to try to negotiate a peace at this point. Hey, the king goes back, I get your daughter, I give you some stuff, we work out a trade arrangement that works well for me but isn't horribly, aligned. All kind of shit like that. National income for these countries is basically $50. And if you've captured more stuff, whatever, you get more. Turning in one set, including luxury, semi-luxury, $80 for the Spaniards. And, that significantly changes the alignment there. The problem, when we get back to the Dynastic, I'll give them the money in a moment. The problem with this situation, though, is Maria has a guile of -2 and isn't particularly good in anything else. She is not a catch in a lot of ways. She's a little sickly, not attractive to the people and the nobles, and drains her husband of military strength. She is just about the worst kind of wife you can have. And so it may not be my most appealing choice. So I'll look at Italy, who got the role, to see if they have another option that looks better. But that piece is pretty important to me. Unfortunately, the marriage contract is kind of weird. Again, the game is not good at nailing things down. The nature of these contracts is extremely varied. They can cover agreements about trade, safe passage of trade, non-aggression, exchange of land, exchange of goods, money, etc. Anything permitted that does not contravene the game rules. Okay, these contracts cannot be broken. So, there is no mechanism for handing land over, though, except somebody occupies it. So, again, I don't know if you can just hand it over. There's also no mechanism for resources passing between players other than the movement rules that apply to it, and exchange of goods is in there. As far as I'm concerned, I think the only way to resolve this is to say these have to be handled within the game rules itself, but they're binding. So it's not a big deal. Unlike other agreements that happen, you know, they don't have any binding factor in them, but also you can't just hand them away. So for example, when England handed Calais to France in the initial statement, there was no formal declaration of anything and nothing transferred power, and France didn't get it because they didn't manage to have the time to physically occupy it with a unit. And I think that's perfectly fine. It makes sense to me that, you know, if you never dispatch your own people with a military force to the location, maybe you have never set up your administration there, you know, and it continues as a shadow territory where you have every right to it. Now, if the marriage ends for any reason, the death of one of the people, I think, is the only reason, but if the marriage ends up ending, all the contract aspects are voided. But there are problems there too, because there's dowry issues, which, shit. And again, this is not well, you know, there's so much that has to be put in this to make it make sense. It may only be controlled territory. Okay, normally a female character. I'm trying to see what happens when a dynasty. I know there's rules for it. When a dynasty, there's somewhere where it says what happens when a husband dies. The wife goes back. But I'm not sure where that's embedded in this. For as long as the marriage exists, the conditions of the contract apply. But if you transferred something, it can't be undone. Well, let me see if I can try to find how that's worded. But again, you know, they're trying to express these hugely complicated human practices and traditions that are way more complicated than what the game even tries to look at within a set of formal rules of a few paragraphs in a rule book. And that is a hard thing to do. Probably an impossible thing to do. I don't think there's any kind of dowry type rules or passing territory that goes back after you die, which makes sense. There's just no way to handle it, and that means that my interpretation works. In particular, I found it's in the death rules, not in the marriage rules. If a character doesn't survive, your character is destroyed, whatever. Marriage contract, any marriage contract still in effect throughout that character's marriage is terminated. If a dead character leaves a surviving spouse who came from another dynasty, they're returned. See Marriage 8. I don't think a marriage dealt with that. I've looked through that pretty heavily. With one exception, the widow of a king is retired from the game. They don't exist, which is kind of weird because sometimes they actually maintained a great deal of power in the country. But I don't see anything about any resources returned, including territories, whatever. So I'm going to go with the you must transfer stuff as otherwise expressed in the game. And now I've spent, you know, a half hour paging through the rules or whatever, trying to figure out what the hell, how to interpret everything and everything. But it is, again, that's one of the things that makes this a tough game to play. You sit down with it, you think you have a good grasp of the game, not just the way I do, and you find the rules just are not sufficient to necessarily cover everything. The time we played, I know we spent probably as much time digging in the rule book as actually playing. We didn't get through a lot of turns. I don't know, you know, I don't think we got to the third generation, for example. You know, I think we got a little further than I'm at now. About the odd, even, simple die roll being sufficient for the negotiation here. So Italy came up with, I'm going to use these to track marriage certificates and drop them in place with each relationship. But what I came up with as an option was I return the king, peace, I give back all of the Spanish territory that I've seized, which means basically evacuating it. I get a medal every turn and give a grain every other turn. The grain every other turn means that Spain will have a constant flow of semi-luxury turn-ins, but, well, and every other turn-in. It would give Italy overall the advantage. There's no question. Italy's winning the war, and they're taking a bad wife. However, overall, it seemed like a fair deal. Spain refused it on an even. I can't think of any kind of little modifications. I gave quite a bit as Italy for this. So I'm kind of feeling like Spain doesn't think that this is the turn to make the peace. We think that we can put a big army up with all this money again and make another attack. But this is a one shot for Spain, basically, because, well, first of all, we're not getting a whole lot of armies back. It's next turn that we get all our armies. But whatever, this surplus of cash, I'm not going to be able to generate this on any regularity. It's because of the territory I took from France. So I think Spain's making a bad decision here. But again, it might be that Italy didn't like the deal. Let me roll again and see if Italy makes a weaker offer. On odd, they will make a weaker version of the same offer, because I feel like that offer was maybe too strong for Spain. Yeah, let me think up another one. But again, this is the way that I'm doing my negotiations and counter negotiations, is just really off the cuff type of stuff. And using up all the time I have available this morning before work, I managed to come to a single resolution of the first diplomatic experience of this turn. Spain and France and Italy have come to an agreement. I write it down here that they have a marriage agreement. I don't want to put all the specifications there because it's really related to the dynasties. So I wrote up the requirements here. There's going to be peace between Spain and Italy, and that has to be preserved as long as this marriage exists, which could be, you know, down to here, you know, the expected length of the game. In exchange, all Spanish homeland will be returned. Italy has to leave them. Spain is free to move in and take them. Spain will be giving $10 and 1 medal each turn. I had an intermediate one between the last one I had, which was Spain gives these two territories to Italy or lets Italy keep them. That's problematic because then it means Spain's home army is reduced in size, and that's not a good thing. But Spain is worried. They have a huge army coming, but they may not be able to defeat Italy. So it's why I felt both sides still felt like they needed to do this. Spain gives that. Italy will give 1 grain every even turn. And then I also expressed somewhere that the king is released in the peace thing. He goes back here. And I marked that she is now part of the Lonosisto dynasty. And I expressed that with this little thing. Again, you're seeing why they made the choice to use these little sheets. They contain the dynasty name on them. But in terms of understanding everything completely, and not using up lots of little sheets of paper. Yes, I'm cheap as hell. My scrap is free. That is not this, there's probably, again, you probably go through all the sheets in the course of a game. And I mean, you're talking about copying hundreds of things to play this more than a couple of times. You probably use up your entire pad of paper, or there's 2 pads, in the course of one moderate size game of this. And that's very disturbing to me. You could, if this could all be on a computer or a tablet or something, and it would be really much easier that way. And at some point we'll have computers where maybe I have something on the wall and I can just go over and exchange stuff around and have built a little piece of software easily that can handle this graphically. In fact, I could probably do it in Visio very easily. The problem, of course, is all the different, whose holdings are where. This is actually a game where something like Vassal would probably be pretty useful, although I don't know if the display capabilities would handle this. But anyway, that took me, with explanation and everything, maybe a half hour to figure out. And we now have a resolution. Which maybe I can remember when I come to actually playing the turn. For one player, for one alliance between the players up here. And of course, there's nothing in the dynastic sequence that handles when you arrange these things, so you can do it at any time during them, but I do it kind of after everything's done. But it's really not the case. I mean, marriages is here, but other agreements and everything can be come to informally during it as well. This is the one period in the game where you're allowed to discuss shit freely with one another and make any kind of deals that aren't bounded by the man on the field situation. Already we see something has just happened that has negated some of the chaos of the beginning of the game. Somebody came out with an advantage out of it, no doubt, but if players had started out with characters who were marriageable, deals could be cut right at the beginning of the game that would prevent war, that would prevent some of this craziness that happened in the first 10 years of the game. And now, hey, it's the first year where everybody's old enough, right? 15 years old now, where there's characters old enough to create these marriage alliances. But the cost is Spain's now at a disadvantage to Italy. That's fine. I don't, whatever. But France is pretty much neutralized. Well, at least we have a leader now. I don't know how good he is. Yeah, he's okay, I guess. But yeah. In terms of representation of this situation, I see an immediate problem again. We've got this marriage contract written out, but it almost feels like the how do we put this? The stipulations of the agreement that are ongoing, the transfer of metal and grain, are not trivial to remember. It feels as though there should be some kind of token on each of them saying, I owe X to X on this turn and whatever. That there's just nothing there to do that with. I can certainly create stuff and hand it out to people, but at this point, you know, I'm not sure how to represent that, because here's what happens. You know, let's say Italy loses its territory adjoining Spain. Now Spain has to go through more work to transport that metal a turn, and it may mean a fleet's committed to that and everything. And if you can arrange things so it's impossible to give something, that's fine. So like the $10 is going to get transferred every turn, but maybe either Spain or Italy can arrange it so that they cannot get their goods to the other person. And to what degree are you allowed to do that? You know, am I allowed to deliver and then sail my fleet so that it's too far away to possibly reach? And then do I have to make an attempt to set that up or whatever? Again, all that stuff's kind of not spelled out in the game. The simplified transport of resources, the optional transport of resources rules, I don't know if they're simplified. And they're kind of vague because it's not clear whether the resources are limited to a movement rate, and, or if they can just trace throughout the board and are freely transferred on your movement phase, though, for whatever reason. Again, the rules are really not well expressed in this game. Whether those are, you know, would actually solve this issue at all and reduce some of the potentials for, hey, what the fuck is going on with this game exactly? While I'm at it, I probably want to make this guy a prince. A prince of what is the question? Well, I'm only getting 1 metal a turn. I am producing 2 grain, 2 sheep, and these other luxuries. Getting an extra semi-luxury sounds like a really great idea. So I am going to give him the title, I'm going to give my good John here the title of Prince of Dauphin, and he immediately transfers over there. Into that, it gives him a +1 to his strength, period, which reduces the penalty that his wife gives him. But, you know, that's, I think, worth it. And so now Italy, at least officially, has become this slice of southern France, and we'll see what other deals I make, but I gotta stop now. Also able to secure a marriage with the English. Somewhat more limited. They'll be giving a wool to the English immediately. The English want that. There'll be peace between France and England as long. This is actually to the English first daughter, which is a big deal because if Henry dies, she's the heir. There's no exclusionaries here. So it's possible that the French could inherit the English throne. Unlikely, but it's possible. Peace between France and England, and France will be giving a resource every even turn to the English for as long as they can. You know, right now they don't have many. Now, something I didn't note, and there is no rule on this as to how to deal with it. Remember that Spanish bride had a low charisma. That's going to cost Italy $30. Italy has $4. I believe that they're going to have to take that out of their income, but there, again, is no rule about how that's applied if you don't have piles of cash laying around, and nobody does except Spain. On the other hand, the French are going to get $30 because they got a high charisma bride. A huge thing. I mean, the French have no capacity to gain money or anything, but now they're freed up to attack the Germans and capture back some of their territories. Germany is holding Flanders and Calais, the English would probably be willing to arrange some sort of trade of Calais with the French. And here's a weird thing. So the French and English have a peace treaty. Does that mean that they can't exchange land? I would say that's unfair, but if you read the rules, if you took my interpretation and read the rules literally, it actually is what it would mean. Like, you would have to specify. Now, okay, we can write into they're at peace unless they both agree to limit that peace, that kind of language could be baked into these. And we can kind of assume that's there in an E, because I don't want to write, 8-page documents that handle each marriage in this game. So that's just going to be kind of the assumed thing. If both countries agree to some sort of exchange, they can relax elements. And that's probably true about anything in the marriage agreement. So, maybe the exclusion could come about, although you wouldn't want it to come about as the French, because this is the French heir. So we've got, a potential of a dual heir situation. But the English are willing to take their chance on that. And the French are like, yeah, this is important enough for me to give you that payment and to be your buddy and everything, because I could inherit the entire English crown, and that would make me quite potent. Germans, I think, got the next choice. And what they'd love to do is get themselves some kind of alliance that'll help. There are a couple of women available. They only have male heirs, so they can't formalize anything except for a female, and a female is a bonus. The Italians have one. That's very attractive. She's fine, And the English have one, and that's it. The others having been taken already. So the Germans actually have room for 3 women. The king could take another wife, but also his prince could, which is actually advantageous because the king's more likely to die first, la la la. Yeah. Especially since he's good in battle. With the English, the English would probably accept something like, how about we cut a deal and be friends? Just that. Because I've gained a metal, which is useful. Would rather have wool, but whatever. And could focus my efforts against the Italians, which would be great. And maybe, just maybe, a worthwhile trade anyway. The problem here is, the other one I looked at was for the Italians. Now, the offer for the Italians just doesn't seem very good. Like, I could, of course, give Italy Anjou and Burgundy. And that seems, like a freebie that I could just give for the marriage, and not a bad choice at all. But I don't know if that's worth it for Italy. I'm going to get those. And Germany's tied down with the English. So it's hard coming up with something. If there was a resource that I didn't mind giving away, I would be glad to take their metal, because although I'm getting a medal every turn from Spain, I've got 2 grain and 2 wool, so that second medal would be great, but I don't think Germany is willing to just give away their remaining medal. Certainly not in addition to the territorial gains. That would put Italy in a really powerful position if we did that. And it wouldn't buy Germany off. Like, if I'm going to give away the medal, I might as well make my deal with England, and maybe Germany and England go after Italy. And in fact, I think that's where I'm going to head. So I'm going to see if I can make that kind of deal instead. Of course, England's got kind of a scattered kingdom here. We would like to exchange Calais for something, but certainly the English holding of Friesland would be worthwhile. Now, maybe England would be willing. I have no wool. Maybe England would be willing to take a wool every turn, and give Friesland back, and some kind of arrangement like that. So I'll work along those lines. Ease of recording things, I'm beginning to think maybe I should allow transfer of control to be automatic, to not require occupation. It's to everybody's advantage who's involved in the marriage. It's in some ways what this states. Anything is permitted that does not contravene these. Let's see. They can cover agreements about trade, safe passage of trade, non-aggression, exchange of land, exchange of goods, money, etc. I don't know, because all the others are handled within the rules of the game, except maybe exchange of money. I don't know if there's a rule that actually says you can just hand cash over, and I assume you can. Yeah. It would certainly make life a whole lot easier if, we could kind of automatically exchange stuff. Now, you can enter somebody's territory without taking it. That's allowable. You don't have to flag it, as it were. So that's something to consider. Yeah, I'll keep going with what I'm going well. The English refused a couple of offers, including, the up the ante. Basically what I was looking at was, I give you a wool every other turn, maybe every turn. We do a little bit of exchanging here. And we work together to attack Italy. We make an agreement to attack Italy. Without sort of everything, it kind of doesn't work. Although the attack Italy can be kind of assumed. Hey, and it would only be like an attack Italy this next year or whatever, which, would create its dynamic, and then we see what happens, from there. But as a little sweetener, I made an offer of throwing the French king in, because the French didn't stipulate anything. So the Germans don't know about the Anglo-French alliance, but it's like, even though I've moved stuff already into the French hands and recorded it and everything, that's not announced yet, but I think the English are aligned with the idea of having the French as an ally here, and trying to wipe out Germany. Germany's appealing to us. We're real close to the extra wool that we would like. There is another medal down here. I don't know, how it's gonna all kind of levy out, but yeah. So anyway, that kind of fell through, and we'll see who next comes up. And you can see how much expense I'm paying, on this kind of negotiation. This happens, though, in a lot of my games. Like, when I do the trade sequence in Civilization, I'm running around the table again and again trying to come up with trades, but those trades are usually, hey, here's a fair-sounding trade, odd or even you want it, and then the next person offers it. Here I'm being a little bit more, a little fuzzier. It's not like this crispness that I have in the Civ trading. Probably something just came up. Spain was looking for deals, and I'm kind of like, hey, England, would you help me against Italy? And, enshrine that into the marriage contract. They can't, because Spain has an alliance with Italy already that invokes no perpetual peace as long as that marriage lasts between them, and you can't violate it. That seems to be pretty clear here. You can't put yourself in a position where you can't satisfy an agreement by choice. So once I made that agreement with Italy, I can't violate it and break it by making another agreement with England and just put myself into a guaranteed problem. It's possible that you could set yourself up where you have a defensive alliance against or a defensive alliance with someone who you're otherwise must be at peace with is, ally is contracted, and you've got two things that are mutually exclusive, and it's quite possible that one will break, but you don't know that the event is going to happen that will break them. So I think you can kind of engineer a potential problem, and otherwise the game stops. You'd need to really worry your little brain. Well, what happens because I lost my wool. I can't give it to you anymore, but I kind of arranged to lose it. Well, you arranged to lose it because you didn't put your armies there, and does that mean, you couldn't contract to say you'll do this, but yeah. and again, it's this tangled, what is breaking the rules of the game and what is not, I don't know. But yeah, I'm having a hard time finding anything for Spain here. Spain has a female. I'm sorry, that's Italy. Spain has a male available that they would love to find a female for. Italy doesn't see any particular reason to give Spain a wife, so there's no real edge there. So I think Spain is going to have a hard time cutting a deal. They could come up with some sort of, they could come up with something with England, I guess. Let me see, what's my production? It's going to be iron, wool, and semi. And notably, I'm missing grain. Am I getting that from Italy? This is the problem. I'm getting it every other turn. If I could get grain from England every other turn, but it's hard for England to deliver that grain. I would have to commit a boat. I'm at war with Germany. My navy is kind of necessary against the other player with a navy. So, I don't know. Interesting point. Like, Anna is not old enough yet. It's only the first child who's old enough to be transferred, so I can't make any marriages anymore anyhow. And I think we're actually pretty much done with that. I've been worrying around, failing to do anything valuable there. That will put us on the announcement, and we announced the 2 marriages and anybody who died or whatever, which again, who knows. Because yeah, I've got marriage, married, nothing, married. Yeah, there's no more marriages available. If there was a loose female, she could marry into the German family. And I believe that means I go to the interface, and I am kind of pooped out already. Much of it to no effect, because I was trying to make marriages with people who are too young. She's only 10, or he's only 10, 5, 10. And again, it's hard to keep track of this shit, and I don't know that these would make it all that much easier. You could maybe use some kind of color coding on them or something. There's a whole lot of ways of expressing information that the game does not use, but as is, it's not that much better than what I'm doing if you have all those sheets. The one thing you can do is you can hand a sheet and it says whose dynasty it is on there, which might be of some importance. Of course, you really need the genealogical charts to figure out who's the actual heir. I mean, you can piece it together out of the papers, but you really do need the genealogical for being able to see that at all easily. The one thing that this gives that's more valuable is you can have a married couple together in a dynasty. You don't have to, have all this shit going on. So essentially, they show a genealogical chart here as example 6, but they don't really tell you need to draw one of these, but it's their way of explaining how you get how the dynasties inherit, and it's pretty obvious that, yeah, you're going to need genealogical sheets for all the nations anyway. If you don't have that, By doing it directly, then you're going to have to draw it from these. Anyway, I'm fatigued. I created another prince that I didn't announce before, the Prince of Bohemia. The reason I'm not making him say Prince of Bavaria or Lorraine, which would be risky, is he has a low charisma, which means he would reduce the chance of gaining resources in the province. On the other hand, the Italian prince has positive charisma, so he gets a +1 to the die roll. Basically, what you do is you roll a die. If you get a 7 or higher, or a 0 or less, it impacts the production. With a 0 or less, there's no production. With a 7 or higher, there's a positive production. Because this is just the crown prince, it's kind of cool because you can assign them territory, and then when they inherit the crown, the territory devolves to the crown, and so you can always do that. If I create other princes, dukes, whatever you want to call them, there's more of a problem because they could end up creating their own lineage, which will pass down throughout various, it could actually leave the family entirely. It could also end up in a somewhat less bad situation. It could end up in the hands of someone with a low charisma who doesn't, who doesn't produce the resources. Females, well, spouses, because you could conceivably have, you can't have principality, whatever you want to call these. I calling them principalities, but really they're these governorships. Always, I believe, go to the male in the relationship. So, if you've got a married female, her husband rules it. If her husband dies, it might go to, a son or whatever. And I don't know, maybe she can be the regent, but until he comes of age. And there don't seem to be rules for that. There's rules for royal regents, though, which are different. But, yeah. Yeah. So the bonus, though, is they produce 2 extra income for their dynasty, and since they're the same dynasty, that's kind of cool. I've pulled the taxes. The only person who took increased taxes were the French. I feel like they've got, I'm assuming your capital is going to be very hard to revolt on you, but whatever. And so they're collecting up a little wad of money, and I'll build some armies and start increasing my territory at Germany's expense at least, and maybe at Italy's too, but maybe not. I'm actually following the sequence of play this time more carefully than I usually do. Usually I take my income and I immediately subtract my maintenance costs from it. But I didn't do that this time. So now I'll cover that. The fact that I didn't do that is somewhat problematic because I ended up maybe picking the wrong amount of money for taxation. Some people, like England, who have a big army, ended up spending more than they counted on, and maybe they would have done the increased taxes so they can build their forces. I don't know. It's getting complicated. Just the juggling of all the things, the numbers and everything in your head. It's not like EU where there's all these nice spreadsheets to handle everything in, and also. There's also that I'm just not used to it, and I've played EU so many times that I'm very used to it. I have to keep track of what's going on here too. So Italy owes $30, which I have to take care of. I guess this is when I give my continual payments to the Italians. So Spain handed $10 over to Italy as well. I marked that down with a little circle here just to indicate that I did it. I don't know how I'm going to keep track of this. It's really, I feel like every contract has to be examined in detail. Now, right now, I have 2 marriage contracts. I'm already feeling the burden. Now, granted, I am not playing this, you know, opposed. There aren't other people handling all these and trying to remember everything. But honestly, unless each person has a copy of the contract, it's fairly likely somebody's going to forget something, especially once you get to a fair number of things. They're building everything they can in terms of armies. I don't think anybody's building any fleets. The reason being, Germany's not going to have a big enough army to be able to do anything to the English, and the English have their full fleet in play. Now, that actually does create some problems. It allows the English to maybe send one ship to go do some resource transportation or something like that, but I don't see much impact on this turn right away, but who knows, later in the turn maybe something needs to be done. So yeah, everybody built their maximum army. In France's case, that's 2 units. And most of the players, it's everything, you know, it's everything they have available. No, Italy did not. Italy is the one person who didn't. Because although I have enough territory to build my full army, and I have a few damaged pieces, I don't really feel like I'm going to pursue much of a war this turn. We'll see. I may have made the wrong choice, but by spending less, I have more money for later turns when I need to spend the money to build. So, I mean, each turn you maintain a unit, it costs you $2. You don't want to build units that you don't need. On the other hand, also, money is victory points. So, if somehow the game were to end, and there's no rules for that, that would cause that. So I'll deploy everything, and everything's going just to the home country, so no biggie there. Little thing that you might want to change. Governors are not allowed to build troops in their own territory. They rule whatever troops are in their territory automatically. They outrank everyone except their king, but in that territory. So you can't have another prince in charge or whatever. But yeah, that's a little weird. And it would make sense to me, you know, given the nature of the period, that dissident nobles would be able to build their own forces. They wouldn't be relying on some other country providing them to them. And more importantly, that, or more likely, that it would provide you some place where you could build a couple of units a turn or something. It wouldn't make too much. I don't think it would be too big a modification to the game to just say, if you're the governor of a territory, you're allowed to build 2 units there. And one of the most notable thing is the king can't take those units away from you. So you could, here's the problem. If you're from a different dynasty, you would still command that king's troops if they were in that province, like that nation's troops if that province. So whose troops would you be building? Would you be building them from that province, from somewhere else? It becomes complex, but there's other things about the governing that aren't really well explained. So I wouldn't be too terribly upset if the prince could build units of another kingdom, you know, because technically, if that is owned, the king shouldn't actually be able to raise those units. They should have a limitation. But how would you determine who gets precedence or whatever? Well, give precedence to the king, thereby making that little option a little less violent. And it gives some kind of bonus where, like, I can build some units up here at the front, but this isn't in my home country, so there are no Italian units that could be built there, I would say, and that's got to be garrisoned, even though I made him the Prince of the Dauphin. Not sure what happens if somebody takes that from him. Uh-oh. Can you make a governor that's not your home province? doesn't look like you can't. Yeah, maybe it's best not to give them the ability to build troops, because technically now, should he be allowed to build French units there, and what happens with them if the French king comes? Does he seize them over or whatever? I don't know. So maybe we'll just leave that alone. A little worried, because conceivably if the French take this, who owns it? Like, that title is still associated, and I don't know if it could disappear that easily. So yeah, there's a little bit of fuzziness in a lot of these roles, especially when you start hitting the optionals. Me into the movement phase of the game, and I think this is about the pace the game is going to go at, which is kind of what I remember. The game just started getting interesting, and then the weight of it just started pressing down, and very quickly it became obvious that, like, yeah, maybe we could get another turn in, but so that let's play till 1400 is actually quite a goal. We're gonna see how it bloats. I had someone mention that, yeah, they had, their family trees just explode so much that, like, they weren't even bothering to roll people up. They were just discarding them at birth. We got the first draw. As was kind of common in that era, there were blank events, which are probably, especially Games Workshop definitely did some of these with the maybe assumption that players would write their own, whatever. I'm just going to leave it in as a blank, a no event. I got no problem with that. I don't think every turn should necessarily have something special happen, although plenty of them don't. Now, England does not have any marriages. I think this is hard to tell. No, they do have one. So, they do not have any responsibilities except they can't attack the French. And they're up first. They're not really big enough. I don't think they're big enough to attack the German headquarters or homeland. And they're not fast enough, i.e. they have to stop in Franconia to take Bohemia. So that's kind of an interesting situation. Although obviously it's to their advantage to go first with the English, they're not in a great position vis-a-vis the Germans. In particular, I can't go grab Lorraine safely with just one unit. Because then I'd be abandoning, I'd be basically moving one unit. I couldn't move my cloth back, but I could move my whole army down there, and that would be a little safer. That, though, puts me a little bit at risk with these guys, but I think I'm going to do that anyway, because that way I'm grabbing new territory. Well, new resources. And it's a resource that I have trouble getting. So, I'm putting a little pressure on the Germans by seizing one of their resources before they can grab it. I should move this back. And I think that's really about it. I sent my medal back to to England, and that I have a force large enough to do a naval transport. If the Germans put their ships in the way, I have enough ships to counteract that. There wouldn't be any naval combat or anything. We're on the Italians. They drew the next turn, and I look at their contract, and again, I'm lucky. There's only 2 marriage contracts in the game at this point. Start imagining how it's going to blossom, especially if you have, like, I mean, you could easily have 4 or 5, 10 marriages out there, and they probably don't all have to express important things. Some of them could just be, hey, we're just gonna get married, setting up pairs of marriages and stuff like that, negotiating marriages without a lot of stuff. But the point is that the game starts out with players in a position where they do not have the capability to use their resources directly without either engaging in warfare, or, as is more intended by the game, engaging in this kind of dynastic diplomacy. And it's sort of the trigger to the dynastic diplomacy side of the game, which is what it's supposed to be about. Well, handling it all by formalized written treaties works fine in most games. Usually you'll have, no more than one treaty between any pair of players, and usually it's not that many players that have treaties. But here, it's quite possible that you're going to have all kind of smoothing out and little balancings out and everything. Maybe somebody's paying you a couple bucks a turn or something along that lines. There are other things that can happen, though, like temporary agreements, like the Italians have to leave the Spanish land here. But this is an even number turn. I have to figure out how to get a grain to the Spaniards. And that's not too hard. 1, 2, 3, I've succeeded. But now, how do I remember that I've succeeded? Well, again, I mark this. Now, this is actually only half successful. I haven't sent the medal yet, but that's okay. I'll remember, I hope. Marches in and probably pisses the Germans off, because Italy and Germany had sort of this agreement to work together in general, but circumstances have made that not really applicable, even though they didn't come up with an alliance with the English, since we're abandoning Spain, and I'm using this as an Italian marker. Well, grabbing a couple German territories here, and in particular a resource territory there, just seems appropriate. I may not want this prince here. I'll move him there. Yeah. This agreement's a little screwy. And they don't really have, they're not allowed to ask the English what they mean. I have a contract to hand a wool to the English. Actually, since it's just a contract, I'm just going to throw it here, which might cause something else to happen. If I put it here, I'm giving the Germans a shot at it, which I don't like the idea of, and I can't push it any further. I mean, England could allow me to. I could move it. Whoa, that's an army. That shouldn't be there. I don't want an army there. I could have actually shifted it to Friesland, but it's can't transport on the English ships. And this is where the optional rule for goods transport is a little different, and would have allowed me to just deliver this to England without any problem, one way or another. The question, of course, of like I could have gone 1, 2, 3, or maybe all the way to the capital. No, they get 4 movement, right? 3 movement is armies. Can't keep track of that. But whichever it is, it's not clear in the rules whether they're limited by movement rate if you use the optional. So, again, painful. Now, France was planning on taking those German territories. That's not really an option anymore. So we will take these German territories instead, which was not the intention, but there's no requirement that I not take Calais. Germans getting the next pick. They're going to launch an attack on the Italians here in Bavaria. It's an easier stack to fight than the English one. Grabbing Friesland might be important, but I'm not really capable of holding that. Whereas destroying some of the Italian army, hey, maybe something will happen, like Italy will, I don't know, they'll probably just attack me. But at least I've got the more likely chance of being victorious here. And I'm bringing my prince along, and the reason for that is he adds his strength. Any particular character can only add +2 strength to a battle, but with that extra prince, I do get an extra die roll. They're allowed to sum up. I don't have to use him. And he also adds an extra army value, so that's kind of cool. And now, the Germans were successful in their battle. They just wiped out. The Italians tried to retreat, which was a mistake, because all the pre-battle rolls, just wiped them out. It wouldn't really matter. I didn't have to make the choice because I had no pre-battle. I had no effect on the pre-battle rolls, so. But I would have gotten an additional attack swung in that would cause at least one more casualty, no matter what. So my decision could have been different. The Spanish occupied the territory that Italy granted them, collapsed their stuff, and they're moving their boats over. Looks to me like they're probably going to go attack the English, because there's nothing better to do. I mean, it's really the case. There's no reason for me not to try to gain some of the stuff that the English have left available, because I am locked out of everything in the Med, and have no fear from Italy. The only thing that could happen is a death that destroys the marriage. Speaking of which, I hope I gave the queen rather than, yeah, I gave the female away, because otherwise there should be a prince on the board. That looks like that's the first set, the first operating round. On to the next. Germany gets the next operation. I did not draw an event. Let's put this back. I'm trying to figure out what the hell I wanted to do. It is a rebellion. Unrest breaks out in parts of Europe. Follow the normal rules for rebellion in the basic game. Great. Oh boy. Okay. Rebellion. It's got to be written here somewhere. Oh, jeez. Effects of events: plague, famine, rebellion. Each player rolls a die once for each province he owns and modifies it. No die can be modified by more than 4 or more. No die roll is made for a province containing 4 or more armies, including the tokens as a whole army. Monarch's charisma. However, if he's not in his capital, he gets a penalty. Remember, governors tinker into this too. If you did additional taxation, that's only France. There's a -2 modifier. If a royal male is in the province, his charisma is added to the bonus as well. In an adjacent province that was already in revolt, we don't have any such cases. There would be a penalty. If it's a 1 or less, there will be a rebellion. Okay. All right. These one country at a time, and I handled the English, and you can see they're badly affected by it. This is going to be a serious problem. The effect of the rebellion means I don't produce anything in those areas, and I can only get rid of it by putting a stack of 4 or more units in it. Is it immediate breakdown or end of turn? They have to remain until the end of their movement. So England's got a serious problem there, which could be a great boon for Germany, depending on how they're harmed. It probably just is. This is widespread rebellion, though, throughout Europe. There's no countrywide or anything like that that I know of. It does bring up an interesting question, though. There's a limitation where it doesn't affect areas with 4 or more armies. And does that count for the capital with the fortress in it? I don't know. In England's case, it's not a problem at all. It's not specifically called out there. Honestly, I think that the capital should be able to be in rebellion. It just, you still keep your fort. It doesn't lose that. It actually specifies armies, so I'm just going to play it that way. But I could see making the argument that the capital would be immune to revolt. It is in empires of the Middle Ages, after all. This is a fuck up on my part. I thought charisma only counted if you were at home as a positive. I don't know why. But I forgot to take it into account with the English, so I'm going to re-roll all their rolls. Yeah, it's hard to keep all this shit in mind. I don't even have to take the rolls. Henry's charisma is +2. that negates the -1 for not being there. There is no chance that any of his territories revolt. Disputed succession causes issues, but I don't think occupying enemy territory does. So, like, there's not a greater chance of revolt in the French-controlled territories. That also kind of weirds me out, but whatever. Again, it's the capital, it's not your home country that there's a bonus for, so no issue there. England got away light, Spain did not, and you can see the wonderful counter graphics choices make this so easy to understand. You know, I got control markers, I got army markers, and the rebellions, and they all kind of look the same. It's really hard to process that something is different from something else, in part because the borders are all exactly the same on all the counters. They're all this kind of neutral yellowish color. Really bad design choices in terms of expressing information quickly. Italy got surprisingly bad rolls, given that I had a +1 charisma there. Now, your spouse's charisma is unimportant here. So like the wife charisma is just a matter of an initial cash influx on the marriage itself. So it's kind of strange. They talk about, well, you really have to think before you marry a charisma -2 person. No, not really. That's a big economic hit, but I got to tell you, the other stats are more important, I think. The guile is huge. It adds to your combat strength. It can have severe effects on you. Constitution is your survivability. So I've been like probably considering the charisma a little too much. If it impacted the king's charisma, it would be horrible, though, if it were bad. I mean, it would be really horrible for this event. Germany also didn't get away very easily. And what we're kind of seeing is, wow, everybody's going to have problems. And the English came out bonus. Their high charisma really gave them a good effect. I don't know what the hell to do with Germany. This is actually what I was going to say before I drew that card. I may go squelch revolts because I don't have a really good plan. I would love to get into here and schwack. Wow, it looks like there's more than one army in this province. Oh no, that's 2 provinces. Interesting, I guess. Wait, no, that's not a control marker. I don't know what the fuck's going on. Okay, I really don't. Yeah, I think these were all meant to be here. But anyway, they were protected no matter what, which is to say the Germans could move into Swabia or Lombardy or Venice, which is appealing, but they probably can't hold it because they just don't have an army of any size. But they couldn't make it. Yeah, we'll say he's here. I don't know. They couldn't make it to Piedmont because that's what it looked like, and try to kill that prince or whatever. He's protected behind too many things. So that's kind of an interesting factor. So yeah, I think squelching rebellions is probably my best use for him, unless something happens where there's a weak army exposed to me. Solution is trivial. I've got at least 4 armies in there, so there goes the rebellion. But I can't just sweep through and clean them all up. I got to do them one at a time, and each one takes a turn. While the cat's away, the Italians shift their army over to deal with this German war that they've instigated, and the rebellions going up the coast. And France comes pouring down and starts grabbing Italian territory. Of course, the Italian army will sweep back in. But again, you know, this is like those really light Ameritrash type games in terms of like just opportunism and sweeping in with armies and everything. There was no real agreement. It's just, I kind of think along the lines of, you know, more reasonable stuff than... it's very hard to defend your territories, and especially territories you've captured on someone else, where, I don't know, there's strong reasons why you don't want to lose them. And again, I don't know what happens to this principality if it gets captured. I think it just disappears. I don't know. I got no idea. The game doesn't handle that level of stuff. Deals with some of the loose resources, particularly the cloths that are moving around, shifting some boats, their army moving down to here. I gotta think about this. I cannot block an invasion of England and move all the stuff I want to. However, there's no army here. The Germans could not reach in time, so no problem there. Grab Franconia, and I'm actually in a position where I may end up trying to take the German capital, and that will give me a French king that, you know, is a nice pawn for negotiations with the French. Maybe get me, I don't know, Calais or something back. God, who knows? Along with maybe a marriage or something advantageous. Spain is the only one left. They've got internal problems that I would rather resolve than try to engage in warfare against the English. No reason to piss other players off. But there's kind of a weird situation. So, I mean, like, Germany's pissed as hell at Italy, but they also want to maintain what they've got. So, like, they might come to some sort of peace with Italy and give them Swabia, and even maybe Bavaria, if the circumstances, you know, appear effective. And anything that's not enshrined in a marriage contract is unimportant. So the game's this random chaos if you don't have a marriage contract between the countries involved. It is not the kind of turtling that I thought it was. I mean, maybe that's possible. I know that when we played, everybody was kind of like afraid to do anything, I think. It doesn't feel like it should be that way. So serious weirdness here. Italy gets the first draw, and I haven't figured out what they're going to do. But probably continue prosecuting the war into Germany. Although possibly, no, they may be more interested in the French. And I'm a long way away from the French. I can't negotiate a peace with Germany. So if things turn really south for the English, the Germans might come storming into Italy or something, I don't know. But here's the thing. Portugal offers the hand of an heir. The King of Portugal wants a husband for his 15-year-old daughter. It gives her stats here. She's heir to the throne. The king will pay 40 crown dowry. On the next event phase, players secretly invest trade items from their hand, from their, I don't know, you know, I don't know where they have to be or whatever, and whether they have to get there. Whoever bids the most wins her hands. In the event of a tie, I assume they just disappeared. Determine the winner randomly. That player should create character records for the bride and the 40-year-old king. Normal constitution. When the king dies, she will become queen and Portugal will pass to that player's dynasty. If Portugal is not neutral, this will cause a rebellion. I don't know what that all means. I think Portugal started the game neutral, and I don't know if pass to that player's dynasty means Portugal will change hands, or if it just causes a revolt. If it changes hands and there's a revolt, that's different, because you know, now I've got more than just some vague sort of claim on something that I don't even understand. It's almost a meaningless card, and this is why it's important that these guys are blank, assuming they have ways to get their rulers into play. The fact that Portugal is not is problematic here, because if the occupation of Portugal actually changes, first of all, that's kind of weird. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. So I don't know. So I think the actual occupation is going to have to change, because if the occupation doesn't change, this has barely any effect at all. It's still a sweet event. I mean, it's worth bidding something on to get $40, which is better, you know, which is almost as much as a whole set, and a queen, and I don't know, nothing else really. But if you actually end up occupying Portugal, that's a big deal. And it makes, I'm assuming there are other ones like in Burgundy and such not, it makes there be some sort of more of a dynastic perturbance, that makes the game a little bit more shaken up than simply sitting there controlling things all the time. So that's how I'm going to rule it. However, it's still part of Spain, right? I don't know. I really don't know. And that's where I'm really confused. Is it a governorship? It's not expressed as such. So I would say no, it's not a governorship. Governorships are something else, and I don't know how to distinguish between what is a governorship and what is something like this that is created with an actual control marker. I assume just maybe the title on here, where you wouldn't actually have a control marker in the territory, though you could exert control and become part of the other dynasty instead, or something like that. I'll try to figure it out. All becoming pretty clear why the first time that we played this, we didn't play with any of the optional rules, because immediately they were sort of, I'm not sure I can understand exactly what they're meaning here. At the very least, the basic game, you can kind of get a fair idea of what they're trying to bubble through with it. It's the bold move of dividing its force, since it outnumbers kind of sort of both. We're asking for it here. I can tell you. I've got an extra army and a better leader facing the French here, so that seems kind of cool. And the other thing is, I can't afford to give this shit up. And I'm continuing to poke the German bear because I can't come to any kind of treaty with them at this point. I can't even negotiate and say, look, I'll let you fuck with England, just don't attack Swabia, and I'm fine. But instead I moved in and grabbed Bavaria. Now the problem there is I've got about the same size army. The Germans have a better military value by one. But I'm also still the best thing for the Germans to attack, the only exception possibly being the rebellions themselves. But if the German army gets weakened, the English become more free to just seize the capital, and it's going to be a hard call as to what to do there. And that's why the Italians moved for that. Although it may have been kind of foolish, but the thing is, this is the last round of this turn. So, All right, the English get the next draw, which I'm not sure we necessarily want it, but with Bohemia, with the German king available, we're going in. If we can capture the king, the prince, capture, kill, whatever, that puts us in a very powerful position in terms of making our German gains last. And then, maybe we work with something with France, I don't know what. Because I've got these two damn French provinces. Well, luckily for me, I have fleets and stuff, so that all works out pretty well. And we'll see what shakes out, because the English's only alliance right now is with the French. And they're growing quite a border with the Italians at this point. Here. Yeah. When you have a big border, that tends to be a sign of a problem coming up. But at least we have the dynastic situation. It might be possible, even if we don't get a marriage, to make some kind of agreement without a marriage, to hey, let's chill, man. And our kingdoms are big. Let's not wear them out on each other. Of victory the English hoped for. The Germans did not flee the battle with their rulers, which should actually cause you some issues, but because it was seen as a terrible thing in a way that it maybe wasn't so much in a much later period. But basically it was an attritional situation. Both sides lost two, because the Germans got, even though they retreated, They got their pre-battle roll. They had the advantage there and managed to do a couple hits. So, you know, yeah, it was just a 1 die difference because the English king has actually a 1 plus 2 equals 2 strength, whereas the Germans have a 2 plus 1 equals 3 strength. I have enough strength to quell the rebellion, but it's not the end of my own movement phase, so it's not going to happen. I'm probably going to have to fall back. Germany looks pretty fucking hosed at this point. If the German shit comes up, they do what it will do, but I realized a problem. I forgot to deliver the Spanish medal. Again, you know, really easy to forget. I've got 2 things on one line. They gave the $10. I remembered it a couple of times, but I didn't remember it during the Spanish turn. I don't fucking know what to do. So let's restart. The Spanish Navy was here. If I move 1, 2, 1, 2, that's the first 2 turns. On this turn, 1, I think 2, 3, I'm allowed to deliver it. Second turn, 1, 2, 3 would have been allowed because I quelled that. So we'll be able to solve this issue. It's just, it's very, very fucking easy to not remember the things that you're contracted to do. And that's with only 2 marriage contracts. Now imagine if I have a dozen out there, which is not at all unreasonable. And we more or less finish up the turn with what? The French grab Anglo-May and Aquitaine back, cutting the Italian French holdings down significantly, and the Spanish clean up a revolt and move that 3rd ship into play. So cashing in resources is the next thing, but first I want to make sure I get all these where they belong, because there's big piles. Oh look, a huge German army is going to show up. Probably not. There aren't many German territories left. Oh, we're going to be going there, and let me just see what the cash-ins are. Serious piles of cash accumulating. The only people who could turn in were England, Spain, and Italy. Each only had 1 set. However, the quality of the set was different. The English had just a basic set. That's $50 or whatever. The Spanish got the $80 set because they have barrels, and the Italians had a full, complete alignment all the way up to the barrels, and the full luxuries as well, so $120. So the game says power is wealth, wealth is power. We should feel pretty confident with the Italians that, you know, we're going to make some ground. Now, one of the things is, there, you know, we've played a fair amount of time in the game already, even if we haven't played a huge game of it in terms of like taking up a lot of this. Let's say you were playing, and this is pretty much what we did back when I played it the first time. Okay, you know, we'll play till 1300 or whatever, or 6 hours, whichever is first. Well, that 6 hours probably would have been covered by this, right? So if you're looking at a 1 sitting game, even if it's your first time, or even if it's not your first time, there's a fair chance that you're just not going to get very far in that single setting. I don't know if I've been playing 6 hours worth, but again, when we played it, I know I felt very disappointed that we basically only just started getting to the marriages and stuff, and we had less bars. I can swear it wasn't this chaotic a situation. Again, I mean, we're talking, Jesus, 25 years ago, that I played it once and vaguely remember it. So maybe my memories are a little faulty. But I definitely did not feel like we had gotten into the game very far, yet we had spent a lot of effort on the game. Rolling up characters, negotiations that can get quite complicated and twisted. I just I just don't think the output of this game is justifies the effort involved in trying to play it. It feels like there are other better choices. And given how, I mean, it's more fleshed out than something like Popes and Princes, but that's not saying much. And it also gives, so much less, and all the mechanisms are very Ameritrashy, kind of let's cut corners here and there, not worry too much about the historical aspects. It may just be a problem that's too big to resolve with a board game. But as I pointed out, Crusader Kings does what you want out of this. It's more detail, but it's the detail that's lacking. All right, I'm gonna load this one up, and we'll keep going, I guess. I mean, it could just go on forever, but I want to see that Portugal thing flesh out and see how that plays. I can push this out.